Hi gentlemen, my name's Matt Bishop, as you already know, and you might as well introduce yourselves.
I'm Pat Heuzenroeder.
David Brabham.
You've always been David, not Dave, haven't you, David?
Yeah, always David.
But you are Pat as well as Patrick.
Yeah, mixes and matches depending if I'm in trouble or not.
You're not in trouble yet, so shall we go with Pat?
Yeah, let's go
with Pat. So, obviously you've got a lot in common, but I'm going to start off with something that is obvious from your accents already. You're both Aussies, you're both from Australia. So tell us a little bit about what Australia means to you. By the way, we don't have to talk about the Ashes, because I'm a Brit, so we won't be talking about cricket. We might be talking about cricket later, but we won't be talking about the Ashes. But tell us about Australia. I'm going to kick off with you, David. Tell me what Australia means to you.
Well, I've lived over here in the UK, I guess longer than I've actually lived in Australia. But every time I go back, having grown up there as a kid, learned how to drive, learned how to race. We had a farm, so 4,500 acre farm, so the countryside, the gum trees, the birds, the noise. Every time
You're getting homesick listening to this.
Yeah, no, every time I go back and go for a walk, there's something special about it. And I think a lot of that obviously comes from my upbringing and how unique Australia is.
Yeah. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I'd go right along with that. I think when David started talking about gum trees and birds, that's just spot on. You just don't get, you get gum trees in some places because they've been brought there, but when you're going for a drive and all you can see is gum trees and dry weather, dry ground, even just the way it feels, the sunlight or something like that. But yeah, it's just home. And I think I've always wanted to come over to here. Like I always thought, Australia is just, you can't do anything here. But then when you go back, it's like, man, very lucky to have grown up there.
Well, it's a beautiful country. I mean, I love Australia. Obviously, I'm a Brit, but I love Australia. But Aussies come here to race. That happens. You did. Your dad did. Obviously, Sir Jack Brabham. You now have. Many in between. And by the way, not only from Australia. I remember Emerson Fittipaldi, double world champion, telling me when he landed from Brazil. And he said when he touched down in misty, foggy, freezing England, having come from Brazil, and he said he felt, that was in the late 60s, and he said, I'm now arriving in the country in which somewhere down there is Jackie Stewart, and I can do that. I can do that. Did you have a feeling of that, David? I mean, you've been in here a long time, but I suppose you were brought up in many ways here as well as there. So I'll ask you actually, Pat, did you have a feeling when you arrived here that you're arriving in one of the capitals of motorsport in that sense?
Maybe not when I arrived. The difference I noticed was it was 39 degrees when I left Australia and -1 when I arrived. But I think once you get into the motorsport, you just think this is just the place to be. The connections, how close everyone is in the motorsport world, and the introductions, the racetracks, the history. You just think, if I just stayed in Australia, you just wouldn't experience it and you wouldn't know what you're missing out on. But when you get here, you know that this is the real deal.
I mean, there is great racing in Australia, isn't there? There's Aussie supercars and there's, Bathurst, wonderful circuit. If you want to make it in single-seaters, you've got to come here, haven't you, really, David?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can only get so far in single-seaters in Australia. And if you're not going to go to Europe, you go to V8 supercars. So you get to a certain point where if you want to get to Formula One, you can't do it from Australia. You just have to go over here. And, for me, when I came here, where I was doing Vauxhall Lotus when I first started, which I hated, but I was in it. It was my opportunity.
Why did you hate it?
Well, I guess for me, I had driven much more powerful and faster cars, former Atlantic cars, and then which were quicker than F3 cars. And then Vauxhall Lotus was like, 2 or 3 steps down from that, but it was an opportunity for me to drive for the team that got me to Europe. So, I took the opportunity. We were racing all over Europe. We're racing against, European superstars that ended up winning world championships. You know what I mean? So if you want to prove yourself against the best, you got to come here.
You got to come here.
No, you had to come here, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a V8 supercar driver, although I did some V8 stuff, which is fine. I enjoyed that, but for me, it was all about racing over here in Europe.
And indeed, you did do that, and you did get to Formula One, but you also had some huge success in sports cars. Obviously, winning Le Mans outright in 2009. So
And I'm still racing.
and you're still racing.
Yeah.
And you're almost as old as me.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, family is important. We've talked about country, Australia, and coming here, but family is important to both of you. Now, if I may just start, obviously, you don't mind me saying so with you, because you are a member of one of the great racing dynasties of history. Your father, the great Sir Jack Brabham, 3-time Formula One world champion, first-time rear-engined world champion, the only one who's ever won a world champion in a car of his own name and his own making. Very proud.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the best way for me to put that into words is when I got to 40, I compared myself, I guess, to Dad when he was 40. And when he was 40, he was 3 times Formula One world champion, as you said, in a Brabham. They were the biggest racing car manufacturer in the world in the 60s. It wasn't just the Formula One. He won 10 out of 12 Formula 2 races that same year. You know what I mean?
He was still racing and winning at 40, 44 in Formula One.
His
South
last
African
season in
Grand Prix.
Formula One in 1970, won the first Grand Prix,
Yeah.
South African Grand Prix, and had a great 2 races with Jochen Rindt, which he ran out of fuel on the last lap after leading at Brands
It's
Hatch.
okay, Ron Dennis isn't listening.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
You can tell the story.
Well, that's another story, actually. And then, of course, at Monaco, he went straight on in the last corner on the last lap, and Jochen Rindt beat him. But to do that at age 44 was pretty phenomenal. And
Yeah.
I think I won Le Mans when I was 43. So, age is a good thing for us.
Obviously, you're not an old man. You're very far from being an old man. You're 18 years old. But without embarrassing David, you're sitting next to someone who is part of this absolutely legendary Australian dynasty family. And not just big in Australia, big in the world. The Brabham name is globally famous. And anyone who has, Castrol R running through their veins or loves motor racing or is a petrol head or any of that, Brabham cuts through. Brabham means something. So tell me a little bit about that and, how come you came to end up being mentored, if I may use that word, by David Brabham.
Yes, well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head to sit next to David and to have him by my side throughout this season. And so far, it's just been extremely lucky, I guess. And it really was by chance that we came, our paths crossed, or I intercepted his maybe. But it was on a train to London. I was going to Australia House to chat to some people. And Dad and I were talking about Brands Hatch. And it was probably a fairly busy train, which I probably should be thankful for because there were 2 seats in front of us. And one of them was taken by Corinne Chandok, who sat down.
Purely by chance?
Purely by chance. He said, were you just talking about Brands Hatch? And then sat down, and the poor guy I looked at for 15 seconds in shock, really. And so we had a chat to him for 40 odd minutes on the way to Marleybone. And at the end he said, "Oh, you know David Brabham, wouldn't you?" Because everyone thinks Australians know Australians. Yeah. But I said, "No, actually, I don't. I know of him for sure." And he said, "Oh, I should put you in touch." And true to his word, he did, which I'm very grateful for. And then I met up with David in December 2023, and we went from there.
So it's quite a new association, actually, and you are mentoring. By the way, thank you, David, for introducing Pat to me, which is why I'm sitting on the opposite sofa from you both. But tell us a little bit about mentoring and coaching, David, and what you hope to do with and for Pat, and what you hope that he can achieve as a result.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been around long enough 40 odd years in motorsport, working with teams, working with teammates, working with pros, working with amateurs, working with young drivers. I ran the MSA, now Motorsport UK Young Driver Development Program, for 6 years, and really enjoyed, helping share my knowledge and experience onto the younger generation and help them progress through their career. And, when the opportunity came up perhaps to work with Patrick, it was rekindling some of that for me, where, I can go into a test or a race or a qualifying and sort of watch what's going on. And I can go, okay, that's the area they need to work on the most, and then we start focusing on that. I don't go into too much detail. Pat's got a team, he's got a driver coach there that looks after 3 drivers, including Pat. And I work with them as well as Pat to get the best out of him, so he becomes a Formula 1 driver, an asset to any race team in the future.
Perfect. Make sure you fill your boots and learn everything you possibly can.
Yeah, I will, yeah.
So we talked about family. Obviously your family, all racing,
Yeah.
from Sir Jack down. And but your family, well, your dad's a lawyer. I've met your dad, lovely guy. I've met your dad. Not met your mum, but she's a cellist.
Yes.
She plays in the Sydney
Symphony Orchestra.
Sydney Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah.
Your sister's a ballerina and your brother's an opera singer.
Yes.
So you decided, I'm going to go racing.
Yeah, exactly. They can all go that music route, and I'll just go right down that way.
A different bit of music.
Yeah, different bit of music.
Yeah.
Still music to my ears, right?
You like music though. You like classical music.
Yeah, I do enjoy it just because that's what we grew up listening to. So if it's on, I'm not complaining. But yeah, so we're all the siblings are in the UK, brother and sister in London at the moment. And so that's a nice connection.
And you're
to
in
have.
Oxford,
And
to be
I'm
fair.
in Oxford, yeah. So
Pretty near.
We're very close in Australian terms, I guess. Only an hour on the train.
Yeah.
And then mum and dad, once I turned 18, I'm here on my own.
Independent.
And mum and dad are back in Australia.
Yeah, good. So do you think it's a very high achieving family. Yours is too, but we're talking about him now. But it's a high achieving family, but in these different disciplines. Obviously there's a common thread of music, but there's the common thread that extends to you as well, which is performing.
Yes.
Because racing is performing, and playing in an orchestra and singing and dancing ballet is performing. Do you see a kind of common Heuzenroeder ambition there, or am I overstretching this?
No, I think so, and I think that stems from mum and dad. Well, it has to come from somewhere, right? Yeah, like you said, mum's in the orchestra, so she has been performing. I think she's been playing the cello since she was 7, so she's been performing for a very long time, having to be well prepared and practice. The hours of practice she did. Well, she tells me she did when she was a kid. I think it has really come down to us in terms of the dedication and the practice needed to be perfect at something. But mum and dad just give us the opportunity. They were keen for me to stay in school, but were happy to give me the opportunity to come over here and realise that this is really a don't want to die wondering situation. So I think, I've just got to thank them for the opportunity side of things. But mum is obviously quite creative, and dad really supports hard work and dedication. So
Good combination.
I think that's a very good combination, and I guess the 3 kids are the result of that.
Good for you. Obviously, you were born to racing as a Brabham, but you were not. You were not born to racing. I know your dad and your granddad like cars, but there's no racing going back. So tell us a little bit about your grandfather and your father's interest in cars, but also the fact that actually racing wasn't your very first sport, was it?
No, exactly. I'll touch on the dad and grandpa first. So grandpa was always into his old cars, like more British cars. So
Man of fine taste.
exactly. So he's had many cars and has always been interested in them, and that dad got that bug in that family. So
you're talking about Bentleys,
old Rolls Royces. He's had. I think he's had almost 100 cars or over 100 cars. So
Grandpa.
So I can't list them all, I must say. But so Dad's always had that interest, and he's had a great experience in cars. And then that came down to me. Dad watched the racing when he was a kid, the touring cars and Formula One. I was in Adelaide at the time where he grew up. And then I was the first one in the family just to really get into the racing, like participate in the racing, which was just by a visit to the go-kart track. But before that, like you said, it was not racing, it was cricket. So I'd played cricket since since I could hold a bat, really. Until
and you were a batsman?
Batsman, wicket-keeper, yeah. Until I was 16, then motorsport took over. But up to that point, I was playing at quite a high level, playing third grade for North Sydney Bears. So they'll be the club.
A little check there.
Yeah. And then, motorsport got serious, and then I was coming over here, so I had to stop playing in Sydney.
And I gather there's a phrase, the baggy green. It's very important to Aussies. You're never going to wear one now because you've gone for racing instead. But you were very serious. You wanted to wear the baggy green,
Yeah, absolutely. That was the goal.
It is what it's called, isn't it?
It is the baggy green, yeah.
Yeah.
I won't wear one out of skill anymore, but I might. I mean, who knows? But yeah, so that was the goal. Play cricket for Australia. Absolutely, I put in all the hard work for it. Who knows whether I would have got there or not? But.
And you like your cricket, but you weren't as good a cricketer as a youngster. But you play it now. And is he going to play in your pub team or something?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, listening to all of this, I mean, he's going to be a ringer, isn't he? So.
Bring him in to score a century.
Haven't played in 3 years.
Yeah.
Don't make excuses already. Come on.
I guess my childhood's not too dissimilar to that, but mine was football, not cricket. Although I played cricket, played for the school and stuff, but nothing more than that. But football was my passion as a kid until I got sent to an agricultural boarding school to learn about sheep, and that was the end of football. So
it's an odd substitute.
Well, I think it was my dad's best way of getting me away from motorsport, to be fair, which didn't really work, did it? So, a little bit of a similar thing. Had a passion other than racing to begin with. And then when I discovered racing, and quite late in comparison, I was 17 when I started, it changed my course, basically, yeah.
Well, look, we've talked quite a lot about things outside racing, and you tried to, understand the similarities and differences between your upbringings as Aussies who are now in this cold country because of love of motor racing. But let's talk about racing. And I'm going to kick off by asking a question, childhood heroes. Now, I'm assuming your dad was your childhood hero. Would I be right or would I be wrong?
Not really, because he retired when I was 5. So, I didn't really see him racing. It wasn't until I got older that I realised kind of what he really had achieved and what the trophies were when I walked past as a kid, what they all meant. I guess for me, the first time I really got into racing was, looking at the old Rothman Porsches with Derek Bell and Jackie X in that kind of era. And then from sort of Formula One, my interest in Formula One was, Prost and Senna kind of thing as well, with Mario Andretti, a bit of that as well. I'd say my sort of 2 that I had was Prost and Senna. And I was very fortunate to be on the same grid as them in Formula One. They were at the front, I was at the back. But to be on the grid with those guys was pretty cool.
Pretty cool, but we have to say, since you have mentioned that, you were on the grid, Imola 1994, 30 years ago, were you not?
That's correct.
What did that feel like? And if you don't mind me saying, your hero obviously met his end.
Yeah. Well, that was a strange weekend for all of us, wasn't it?
And your teammate the day before.
Yeah, Roland went on Saturday, which shocked the world and shocked us as a small team. And of course, when you get thrown into those scenarios, you don't, and it's the first time, you don't really know what to do or how to think, and your brain is not in the right place. It's so confused that it's full of emotion and sadness.
I can see it now. I can see it on your face.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah,
it's still there. And, I don't think that ever leaves. It's only when you start talking about it starts bringing it up, which is fine. I don't mind doing that. But then obviously the next day, after quite a few accidents leading up to that, Ayrton goes as well, which was another, it's even bigger shock in many ways. So that whole weekend, and I'm sure you were there, weren't you? You were there.
I wasn't actually
you
at
weren't
that
there?
race.
Okay.
I wasn't actually at, I didn't go to all the races in '94, and I didn't go to that race.
Yeah. Well, you weren't born, so that's all right. So
I remember Dad said he taped it because it was Australian time zone, and then and got up the next morning, watched recording, not knowing anything.
Really?
yeah, my
It's
wife.
one of those ones everybody knows where they were.
Yeah,
if
well,
you're into
I do
racing.
remember. There's things I remember about that weekend. There's things I think my brain's just blocked it out. But for me, my wife was there. She was pregnant with Sam, and that whole emotional stuff that goes on around that. And as a small team, we were the world's focus because there was a problem with the car, and obviously he passed away, and the world scrutiny is on a small team called Simtech, and I'm right in the middle of that as well. So obviously when Ayrton went, the whole focus shifted away from us, which in some way helped us, because I think if that didn't happen, we would have scrutiny for a long time. But when Ayrton went, the scrutiny went over there.
To Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't dwell on this much longer, but just to say, 2 terrible tragedies and 2 very untimely deaths. One great driver that was a prospect for the future, and one of the all-time greats. So terrible, but out of it came a positive revolution in safety.
Oh, totally.
And that's something that all of us can be grateful for. I'm moving away from that. I'm talking about happier days, which is your childhood hero. Who was your childhood hero?
Gotta say, Sebastian Vettel.
Sebastian Vettel
was my childhood hero. Yeah.
I worked with him 2 years at Aston Martin. Great guy.
Yeah.
Tell me why he was your hero.
Well, I just think the person he became when you put the helmet on, you could just see it. And one moment that really sticks out, I mean, this is when he was at Ferrari, but it was a Chinese Grand Prix, and he overtook on the entry to the pit lane. And that was just like, that is the level he's going to go to. He's not just going to sit behind if someone's not braking late enough for the pit lane entry. But just the person he became, and while he was at Red Bull, I mean, so dominant. And you hear Mark Webber's stories about what the lengths he went to win. So I think that's just, I mean, people, I don't know him personally, but I think that'd be a nice goal to achieve.
Well, it would. I mean, four times. Would you
times.
settle for 4 Formula One
I
World
would
Championships?
settle, yeah.
I mean, I do know him, and I worked with him, and you've put your finger on it, because he works so hard. Even towards the end of 2022 at Aston Martin, when he knew he was retiring, he'd still be the last one in the engineering debrief. So that's something to pick up on and to emulate. And he absolutely did that, and of course he was talented, of course he was quick, of course he had it all. But he really worked hard, and it's about that, isn't it? I mean, as a mentor and a coach.
I don't know any world champion or any successful racing driver who doesn't work hard.
Yeah.
You have to. It's just the way the game is.
It's also about, it is about work, it's about teamwork, it's about prep, it's about learning from mistakes, but it is also about being able to do it in the car, which is a kind of, you could call it God-given, or where...
It's called a stopwatch.
It's called a stopwatch and a lap
It's
time.
as simple as that.
But how do you produce it? So I'm going to ask you slightly difficult questions, but I'm going to ask you, where do you find grip? Why can you do it? What are you doing different? We could talk about this for 2 hours, so I'm not going to try and pin down it. But let me put it this way. I'm going to start with you, David. If you're on a quick lap and you think, I nailed that. That car can't go any faster today. It was a 1 minute 24.6. That's all that car did. Every lap was fine. Didn't run wide, didn't lock up, didn't do anything wrong. What does that feel like when you nail it?
Well, it feels pretty good, because I don't think it happens very often where you're fully satisfied.
Yeah.
Because as a driver, you think, I can do more. As a driver, it's about maximizing the level of grip that you've got, and a lot of that comes from the tire. So it's maximizing the tire, maximizing the balance. Obviously, everything you do inside that car and yourself mentally has to be at such a high level. And when you go into like qualifying, as you say, you know, you take yourself to another level. You know, everything becomes heightened. Your sensitivity in terms of the grip, the clarity in your mind, the intent, that just heightens up. And I always used to love being in that place because it's a special place to be. And when you do feel like you've nailed it and you've got pole position, it's not just for you, it's all the people in the background that have worked so hard to give you a car, to give you that capability to go out there and nail a lap time and get pole position.
So you're at the beginning of all that, but you must have had that feeling. So I want you to think about that. I'm also going to throw in a slight curveball. What feels better, clouting a fast bowler for 6 or nailing a brilliant overtake into a hairpin?
An overtake.
Tell us why.
I just think the fact that you beat your bowler, but you've just beaten someone. They've tried to hold you off, but you've just got past them. And well, it's like what David said. You've maximised the grip that you're given at that certain point. The aero, the balance, the way the team has set up the car to give you that balance that you can maximise. Because you can maximise the car, but the car will be not right for the track, or someone has got the car better than you. Yeah, so I think overtaking to a hairpin
Wins it. It's the correct answer, by the way.
Yes,
It is the
given
correct
I'm a
answer.
racing driver.
Well, if it was the other answer, you'd have to get the green baggy hat out
We would.
and wangle it in front of it.
We would. So it's the right answer and you made the right career decision. So we talked about driving, we've talked about cars, we've talked about racing. One thing we haven't talked about in any specific way is circuits. So I want to ask you, favourite circuits. I'll kick off with you, David. Give us 1, 2 or 3 favourite circuits and reasons why.
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of an odd answer here. I deliberately didn't have favourites because I felt if I had a favourite, I'd go really well there.
Right.
And with less favourites, I'd go slightly less, so my performance would alter. So very early in my days, I decided actually, I think it was a race in America. It was a track I really didn't like, and I was crap at it.
You're not going to tell us which one it is.
Oh, it was Lime Rock, actually.
Lime Rock,
It was Lime
okay.
Rock. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
a race at Lime Rock, and it was all bumpy, and it's like 5 corners, and it was like, what the hell's this, you know? And I kind of felt like I had the wrong attitude about it. So I love street circuits, always did well on street circuits. So I mentally made the shift to go, okay, next time I go there, I'll treat it as a street circuit, and then pole position, you know what I mean? So I learned then to actually have the same attitude to every circuit. So I never had favorite tracks. Favorite events? Yes.
Let's have them.
Well, you know, Le Mans, obviously.
I was going to
For
ask you
me,
about
yeah,
Le
I mean,
Mans
Le
anyway.
Mans, I mean, you just have to go to Le Mans and experience that, to see how special that is. You know, Monaco, when my first ever Formula One race was at the Monaco Grand Prix in a Brabham. You know, that was pretty cool, you know.
Shall I tell you something? Obviously, you raced at Le Mans and you won
18 times.
18 times, I was going to say frequently, and you won it outright
Yeah,
with Marc Genet and my mate Alex Wurz in 2009 in the Peugeot.
that's correct.
And I'll tell you a little known fact, was important to me. My 50th birthday party in London, Alex is a great friend, he's one of my best mates. Anyway, he turned up, it's in December, and he turned up and he's carrying a helmet bag. And I said to him, being dim, I said, what are you testing? What are you testing here in England in November? And he went, happy birthday. And he gave me that helmet.
From 2009.
He did.
Wow.
That's a special helmet, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So, by the way, if you could give me... No, I'm joking. But since you're here, and that has to be the jewel in the crown of your career, to win Le Mans outright. So we couldn't let you get away without saying something about the feeling of being part of that momentous victory team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously having raced at Le Mans many times and been on the podium many times, 2007 and 8, I'd won Le Mans in the GT1 category with Aston Martin. And, you know, I was getting on a bit. I was in my 40s and I was thinking, oh, well, you know, what's it going to feel like standing up on the podium when you win overall. And I thought, those days probably gone, you know what I mean? Because I kind of drifted off a little bit from a prototype. So it was kind of strange when I got the opportunity to race for Peugeot that year, because I was racing in America for Acura. Got the opportunity to do it. Obviously, we had a great race and we won, and I stood up on that podium, and the feeling that I had 2 years previously was the same. There was no change in that feeling. But I think for me, what I realized more than anything was the journey to get there, and all the people that have been involved in your life, from family, friends, mechanics, engineers, teams, teammates, to get to that point, to stand on that podium. That's what that meaning meant to me. It wasn't just about the trophy. Yes, it was great, but it was all the people that were part of your life to get to that point that helped you get there.
That's very well put. Now, you haven't had those things yet.
Not yet.
But you will. So, but you can answer the favourite circuits.
Or should I? I don't know if I should.
No, do you like?
Well, I think when I went to Spa at the end of last year in the GB3, that was just spectacular. Not just because it's Spa. It's just, well, we were talking about this earlier, but it's just a track you need to go fast around. But just the way the corners flow into each other, and it just suits those. Well, I think it suits any car, but it suited that GB3 very well. So that's got to be right up there. But I've also...
And you're looking forward to racing there
this year.
Soon.
Yes, that's right. But I think I've also driven around Bathurst in a Lotus, and that was just the best track. So I think that tops the charts for me.
A little bit of Aussie patriotism
Yeah,
coming in
a
there.
bit,
It is a great track, though.
I know it
It's
is.
just such a good track.
Yeah.
I mean, that flows well, and the walls are close, so just...
Yeah. I mean, it's great to watch. It's
Yeah.
great to watch as
Yeah.
well. Obviously, I've never driven around it, but it's great to watch. Yeah. Last question each. We're coming to the end. Last question each. Be brave. A few words about each other. A few adjectives, a few words to say about each other. David, you're going to have to go first with a man with more experience. A few words about Pat, but that means, Pat, you've got to be preparing your answer as well.
Oh, cheers. Pat, I see a young, ambitious racing driver.
You can't argue with any of that.
No, that obviously I see a lot of similarities with myself, my journey with Pat as well, you know, having other interests and then going into racing, being competitive sportsman. I was a competitive sportsman with other sports that I did, always had to kind of be at the top. And I see someone with a really good attitude, wants to learn, knows he doesn't know everything, but he wants to learn and absorb that information and apply it. And he's very good at that. And I see someone that's got huge potential. And that's why I'm excited to be working with him.
Brilliant. Your turn, dude.
It's nice to hear. I think David is extremely experienced, to put it the polite way. No, I'm joking. Extremely experienced, generous, you know, working with me. I came knocking on his door and he's working with me. You know, determined to sort of work together and see what we can achieve together. And then, yeah, I think generous experience. I think that puts it together, and obviously extremely talented. I think that goes without saying.
And I'm so pleased he's also bald. Yeah. Seriously, it's a pleasure and an honour to be working with both of you, and I'm looking forward to the journey ahead. Let's go and do it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, Matt.